You wake up because your alarm buzzes softly beside your bed. Your room is warm, the blanket is still wrapped around your legs, and somewhere nearby a machine is quietly keeping the air comfortable while you decide whether you really want to get up. Then you remember what happens when something goes seriously wrong. You cut your hand and a doctor can stitch it. You break your leg and an X-ray can reveal the damage. You get an infection and antibiotics can attack the bacteria before they have a chance to kill you. Even when your body fails in ways you cannot see, there is usually someone, somewhere, whose entire job is to figure out what is happening. Your ancestors did not have that luxury. There were no emergency rooms waiting behind automatic doors, no antibiotics, no sterile operating theaters, no blood tests, MRI machines, anesthesia, or surgeon checking your pulse under bright white lights. And yet, your ancestors survived. Some survived shattered bones. Some survived terrible infections. Some lived for decades after injuries that should have ended them. So the question is simple. For hundreds of thousands of years, without modern doctors or modern medicine, how did human beings survive when their bodies broke down? The first thing you have to understand is that your ancestors were not helpless. That sounds obvious, but it changes everything. Imagine you are living around 50,000 years ago, somewhere in Western Eurasia. You wake up with a deep cut on your leg after a hunting accident, and there is no road leading to a hospital because there is no road, no hospital, and probably no idea that hospitals will ever exist. You have three problems. The wound hurts, it can become infected, and you still need to stay alive long enough for your body to repair it. But here's what nobody tells you. The first doctor was probably your own body. Your blood begins forming a clot almost immediately, creating a temporary seal over damaged tissue. Immune cells move toward the injury, inflammation begins, and over the following days your body starts rebuilding what was destroyed. You don't need to understand any of this for it to happen. Your ancestors simply had to avoid making things worse. That meant cleaning wounds, protecting injuries, resting when necessary, and relying on other people when they could not care for themselves. Archaeology gives us some extraordinary clues about this. At the Shanidar cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, researchers discovered Neanderthal remains dating to roughly 45,000 years ago. One individual, known as Shanidar I, had suffered severe injuries during life, including damage to the left side of the face and arm, and had lost sight in one eye. Yet, this individual survived those injuries long enough for some of the bones to heal. Think about that for a second. A severely injured person survived in a world without ambulances. And there is another detail that makes Shanidar even more fascinating. The injury suggests that this Neanderthal likely could not have functioned normally for at least some period of his life. That means somebody may have helped him find food, move around, or remain part of the group. The exact details are impossible to reconstruct, but the basic lesson is hard to miss. Human survival was never a solo project. If you couldn't walk, someone could bring food. If you couldn't hunt, someone could share theirs. If you were injured, someone could watch over you. Your ancestors did not replace medicine with nothing. They replaced much of it with each other. And that may have been one of the most important medical technologies humans ever invented: care. But caring for an injury is one thing. What happens when something inside you starts going wrong? That's where the story gets stranger. Because your ancestors were surrounded by a giant pharmacy. They just didn't have labels. A forest was not merely a forest. A riverbank was not merely a riverbank. The plants around you could be food, poison, pain relief, or something that helped an injury heal. And humans were extraordinarily good at learning which was which. You can see evidence of this in some of the oldest human remains we have. Consider Ötzi, the famous naturally preserved man discovered in the Italian Alps in 1991. He died around 3300 BCE, more than 5,000 years ago, and his frozen body gave scientists an astonishing look at prehistoric health. Ötzi carried pieces of birch fungus with him. One of them was the fungus known as birch polypore, which contained compounds that may have had medicinal properties and could also have been useful for managing parasites or infections, although exactly how Ötzi used it remains uncertain. His body also carried dozens of tattoos, and these were not random decorative marks. Many were located near areas where Ötzi had signs of joint or skeletal problems, leading researchers to wonder if at least some of the tattoos were connected to pain relief or treatment. We cannot simply say Ötzi used tattoos as prehistoric acupuncture. That would go further than the evidence allows. But the evidence does tell you something fascinating. 5,000 years ago, people were paying close attention to the relationship between the body, pain, and repeated treatments. They were experimenting. They were observing. They were remembering what worked. And that is how medicine probably began. Not with somebody suddenly inventing a hospital, but with generations of humans quietly noticing patterns. This plant helped. That one made me sick. Pressure stopped the bleeding. Heat made this pain better. Don't touch that mushroom. Knowledge accumulated. Then it was passed from one person to another. But here's the part nobody talks about. Most prehistoric medicine probably looked incredibly ordinary. It may have been cleaning, resting, splinting, feeding, cooling, heating, protecting, watching. The dramatic stories are the least common ones. The real miracle was getting through another day. And sometimes your ancestors faced problems that no plant could solve, because eventually something could go terribly wrong. Your tooth could become infected. Today, you might complain about a toothache for 2 days before booking an appointment. Your ancestors did not have that option. A tooth infection can spread beyond the tooth, damaging surrounding tissue and potentially becoming life-threatening. And archaeologists have found evidence that prehistoric humans experienced exactly these problems. At the site of Riparo Fredan in northern Italy, researchers found evidence of dental treatment associated with people living around 13,000 to 14,000 years ago. The teeth showed signs consistent with deliberate intervention, suggesting that people were not simply suffering passively when something went wrong inside the mouth. They were doing something about it. That's a huge distinction, because we often imagine prehistoric humans as people who simply endured pain until they died. The evidence says something much more complicated. They endured pain, yes, but they also fought back. Sometimes that fight became astonishingly direct. Archaeologists have found evidence of terrination, the deliberate creation of a hole in the skull in multiple prehistoric populations. One famous example comes from Ensisheim in what is now France, where a Neolithic skull dating to roughly 6,500 years ago shows evidence of terrination. And here's the unbelievable part. The person survived. How do we know? Because the bone around the opening had healed. Bone does not politely close itself after death. Healing requires time. So somebody deliberately opened this person's skull, and that person lived long enough for the wound to begin repairing itself. We have no way of knowing exactly why the operation was performed. It may have been connected to injury, pain, ritual beliefs, or some combination of reasons. But whatever the explanation, somebody was willing to perform an incredibly dangerous procedure using prehistoric tools, and somebody was willing to trust them. That tells you something profound about early humans. They were not ignorant of suffering. They were obsessed with solving it. But even the best healer could not save everyone. And this is where we have to stop imagining prehistoric medicine as a primitive version of modern medicine. It wasn't. It operated under completely different rules. There were no germ theories, no understanding of viruses, no antibiotics, no knowledge of blood types, no reliable way to see inside the body. A small wound could become a catastrophe. A childbirth complication could become fatal. A badly infected tooth could become deadly. And the simple fever could leave your family wondering whether you would wake up tomorrow. So survival depended on something brutally simple. You needed time. If your body could defeat the problem before the problem defeated your body, you lived. And humans became very good at creating the conditions for that fight. Food mattered, rest mattered, warmth mattered, clean water mattered, and social support mattered enormously. This is where your ancestors had an advantage that many other animals did not possess to the same degree. You were born helpless, really helpless. A human baby cannot follow a herd minutes after birth. It cannot find its own food. It cannot defend itself. It cannot even regulate its body as effectively as many other mammals.
And yet, that apparent weakness created something powerful: cooperation. Your ancestors had to care for one another because there was almost no alternative.